Hello, my name is Marjaneh Rouhani, and today is Thursday, September 23rd, 2021, and it's equivalent to the 1st of Mehr, which is the Iranian month of the year 2580 in Iranian calendar. The Iranian calendar was updated during the Pahlavi era under the constitutional monarchy that still is ongoing, and this program, which is called the Constitutional Movement Program, and was initiated with incredible efforts and collaboration with Dr. Saeed Hamzavi, and support of Television Iran Aryai, with a special thanks to Mr. Aryan Vatankhah and our producer Siavash, and also Banu Mahnaz, dear Mahnaz, who answers all of our phones and takes care of all the necessary things. I'm very, very honored to be here in your presence during this critical times in history, where every human being is literally looking in the eye of evil. And there's no other way of explaining it. And as we look into the eye of the evil, we also reach within our soul, reach within our hearts to defeat the evil and pass through the darkness peacefully and gracefully, and with all the nations, as the United Nations actually meeting for the 76th year anniversary. And strange things are actually noted. I was just reading the announcement by Mr. Tedros, who actually lobbied, the first person who lobbied to become the head of the World Health Organization, and is the first person who is not a medical doctor. And he says, "The simple act of breathing contributes to 7 million deaths a year." And I leave that up to your understanding and judgment to see what we are dealing with here. Basically, oxygen, of course, is the most important God's given gas in air that we all breathe. There are some bacteria inside inside our gums that hate oxygen, and basically they cause us gum disease. But human beings and essentially living beings enjoy a lot of gaseous cycles, and we are all aware of that. And these strange statements coming from the World Health Organization leader, it's kind of highly questionable at this moment, especially with the controversies that have been going on. And we would hope, anybody would hope that anybody who's behind all of these chaos and pain and suffering, isolation, depression, financial catastrophes for most countries, most people, and strange diseases and death and suffering, would back up and back off. We know what's been going on in Australia. We know what's been going on in Europe, in the United States, which is a constitutional republic. People are also quite active to embrace their constitution in a very peaceful manner. And it's a very interesting process, how Americans do things in light of severe crisis. And this country was based on settlementship and settlers who literally went onto the wilderness and quite bravely set up their homes, their farms, their pets, their wives, their husbands, their children. They set up school, and actually the schools where I remember watching the Little House on the Prairie. I was for the first time exposed to the visualization of how really America started, and how people worked together to build communities, and these communities finally chained together and became the United States of America. And the sheriffs we have, other constitutional sheriffs, and more they're becoming aware of their power, as a matter of fact, within the system. And some of them have written letters to the president, and kind of telling him that basically the executive orders that he keeps writing and keeps issuing is not a law according to the Constitution. So there's a movement in terms of people getting closer to their own communities and to their own legal system, which at the unit is the sheriff system, which is based on the sheriff of every community. I want to say swears or says, I stand by the Constitution. And that's very, very important in this crisis, where literally the United Nations and the World Economic Forum and the World Bank and the IMF and the Bank of International Settlements have joined in, a quite powerful, wealthy committees or NGOs to really enforce things and destroy the infrastructure of not just the United States as a country, but other countries. And people are aware of what's happening, and a few people who are really breaking the laws of the country. And they are supposed to kind of work for people. And it's very interesting when you look at the Bill of Rights in the United States and the Constitution of the United States, and you see how president after president after president, things have kind of started going off the rail. And since the media, for example, has started playing a role, things have turned more south for people, I want to say, because as media has played a role to distract people from ongoing crisis or ongoing active situations, that distraction has really played a huge role for people to kind of not pay attention to what is happening to them, getting involved in wars that they should not be there, or getting involved in crisis that they should not be there, or paying extra taxes for things that has nothing to do with what they deal with, sending money to countries that, when the last budget came out, and actually President Trump was the first president who had the courage to kind of really list all the amounts of money that was going to different countries for different reasons that had nothing to do. It was not charity, or it was not like helping. It was really bizarre statements like sex education in Pakistan, or, I don't remember, I don't have it in front of me, but if you flip through what was going on, he was courageous enough actually to really expose for the first time, and that was a thorn in the eye of the globalists who actually had planned to really launch this pandemic that is going on at the moment, and they are warning that there are more pandemics to come and more viruses to be fearful of, and more health security, according to President Biden's speech in at the United Nations. And people are becoming more and more concerned and more aware of what is happening, because visually they're clearly seeing the classification of people, separation of people, where most people are on, their lives don't matter. Like, for example, we saw for the first time in real life, Americans were left behind in Afghanistan. And on top of it, 7 children were killed by a drone. And all of a sudden, the media is distracting the public by a lady who has been killed by his boyfriend, most likely. I mean, usually, I'm not sure, but usually the first suspect is a close person, or the last person who saw the person, and probably he's under investigation. But the news kind of diverted to kind of really cover up or distract from all of the real information and news that was happening. And the real news is that what's happening on September 30th, where or when there's a huge loan that is due to China. And what does it mean when Ms. Janet Yellen says October 15th, the Federal Reserve is going to have a default? So the most important part of it is the money. And why is money important is because we work 8 hours, 10 hours, or some people work 2 shifts, and even more, I want to say, in different countries to make needs meet. And they share that money with people they love. And I tell actually my patients, we know who we love when we decide who we share our retirement, who we want to share our retirement with, and whose name is on our money account, who we trust, who we love, and who we share because most of the time, most of the day that the sun is out and we can go out and play and do nothing and get on some governmental assistance. Most people choose to have dignity and go out, work, and be productive, and at the end of 2 weeks have that paycheck to show for all the efforts they've made, and be able to purchase the stuff that makes their loved ones happy. It's a tool to make your love show, I want to say. Even when young people decide to get married and they exchange rings and they buy gifts for each other. So it's quite symbolic. And so at the bigger scale, we are looking at this whole situation where is our money? Where is our taxes? What's happening to all of these millions, billions, trillions? And as a matter of fact, if I wanted to study finance at this moment in my life, I don't think I would be able to even wrap around and comprehend with the number of zeros that different currencies are carrying. But what we see, there are these new currencies that are coming into the game, like cryptocurrency, which I think it's kind of a test from people who are quite familiar with what they're doing, testing the public, and people are excited about it because it's away from the central bank. But it's easily, I want to say, monopolized, and easily will be able to be announced as an illegal or a feature of using for something that the central banking system or the intelligence services systems cannot track. and can be announced illegal, even though you haven't used it for any other means, and you can go to zero basically, because it's all in digits, it's all in the digital world, it's all in the hands of people who have set up this digital fortress that every day is becoming a tighter and tighter ring around everybody's neck until we are all hung, as a matter of fact. All these digital equipment that have been, or software that have been offered for free and that we have used for free, it turns out that we've been taken for fools, and it's all been used to kind of assess our intelligence, to copy it for artificial intelligence. Because a lot of people who are behind the scenes, actually, I really heard strange comments from a very top in power people. One of them was the late Prince Philip, married to Queen Elizabeth II in England, who said that the answer to overpopulation is cannibalism. Then we have Bill Gates, who owns thousands and thousands of acres of land and cattle and farming, and says people should not be eating meat, and he is making fake meat for people. And then we have father of Boris Johnson, who is the current Prime Minister of England, saying, England, it's ridiculous to have 70 million population at the time when he was talking. And the clips are there. I mean, you can wipe out anything from, the digital book burning is continuing, but there are people who are downloading some of these historical clips. And he says, Boris Johnson's father says, it's ridiculous that there are 70 million people in England, and maybe at the most we need 10 or 15 million, and he laughs. Then we have, we can go on and on about these behind the curtain people, little people, as a matter of fact, who don't know love, who don't know humanity. And their solution for this obsession with overpopulation of the planet, and the solution to tax the gases that are God's given free, must make him laugh at all of us all the way to the bank, basically, because it's for free, and now they're going to be charging for any use of carbon, and they're going to be able, they have the technology, according to the BIS chairman, who probably has eaten too much tacos and meat, that they have the technology to enforce it. And this whole health security concern and this pandemic has become a tool to enforce this end game or end point, which is the money, basically. And if you look at Israel, where anybody who got double injection, they ended up in the hospital, more than 90%, the late news or the late information. And there again, too, there's just this separation of cognition and understanding that if something didn't work and landed a person in the hospital, then maybe we have to choose other methods of what other doctors, other professionals, other scientists are mentioning and have been yelling since 2020. And they are legitimate physicians, which are getting deplatformed because they mention treatment. And in the United States, as a matter of fact, if you do have treatment, all of this emergency use experimentation will go away. And if you look at the congressional stockholding, you see that most of them own Pfizer, for example. And so there is this conflict of interest. And then there is this mass silence from our legislation wing, for example, in the United States, about all the chaos that's happening in the country, especially in the south border where the borders are open, and there are only a few people who are shouting and yelling, but there's no other person who's talking about what's happening to the United States with the OSHA removing the carbon dioxide issue, where people can get literally poisoned by too much carbon dioxide. And they did have regulation on their website, which they have removed. And if you put in a carbon, they had it such that if you are wearing, they had, I think, a 20-minute limit on wearing a mask, for example, for industrial purposes. But everything is changing rapidly and getting digitally burned out, burned like a book burning of the mid-ages. And I think with the information age, when you go against the masses who are so aware and so, in the age of transparency and age of internet and age of intelligence, and people knowing a lot of information, you going against people's freedom, then it's going to cause a lot of chaos and problems, and these few oligarchs who are keeping doubling down against the public will, which is democracy and their rule of law and their constitution. It's going to land them somewhere, this whole game with, it's going to land them somewhere that they don't want to land, because it's a losing battle, losing game, and this greed that you want more and more and more, and it's not going to play well, because the small business people who keep losing what they have saved, what they have earned, and what they keep contributing to the community are a major force, and the law is on their side. So a lot of people have turned off their television. A lot of people have turned off from the social medias that are censoring people by just mentioning different things. And it's not rude or insulting by any means. And this whole program that was formed to promote constitution, promote rule of law, and humanity, the more it actually, we went forward, and we are going forward. We are realizing that the issue has been deep-seated, and we have a saying in Farsi that the fish rots from the head. And it seems like every speech we turn into in the United Nations, it's not talking about humanity. It's talking about armed forces or getting a teeth against people. And in the past, actually, when we were sending letters to the United Nations to ask for help, for helping the environment in Iran, saving the Caspian Sea, saving the the Persian Gulf, because China continues to do the deep sea trawling, and they're moving west and they're not stopping, and they don't have any obligation, despite all of these limitations that have been put on the United States or the Western countries to meet certain obligations regarding environment, to reduce the temperature of the earth by 1.5 centigrade. China does not have any limit. China is not is required to do anything. And we kept sending letters, especially about, the introduction of this program is the Hyrcanian forest, that they're very unique, and a unique forested massif that stretch 850 kilometers along the southern coast of the Caspian Sea. And the history of these broad-leaved forests, it's magical forests, dates back to 25 to 50 million years ago. And they were basically a very temperate region. And these ancient forest areas retreated during the glaciations, and then they expanded again as the climate became milder. And mind you that according to Earth's calendar, we're still in the Ice Age. And as we know, because people started kind of bringing the issue up, the United Nations and their climate czars, and because they want to use the climate and carbon tax the world and pocket the money and put everyone in a beehive where then they are able to fly with their private jets anywhere and nobody will see them, and just amass people in a very, very small area. That's their evil plan. Now, I mean, they're Luther from the Superman movie I think, on a steroids, and it's not going to happen. And we don't need a Superman. Each one of us is a Superman and a Superwoman. And in our own, with our own dignity, we have been able to stand up, and we're going to stand up to this tyrannical techniques and transformation that has no basis and destroys humanity. And most, once you don't have the humanity, you have nothing. And a lot of people have turned in to their scriptures. They, and they see, for example, when they apply even for their religious exemption, which the United States is known for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and actually we as Iranians, we did experience all of these freedoms under our own constitutional monarchy of 1906, and then the reforms of White Revolution in 1963, where women got the right to vote 10 years before Swiss women did. And so going back to all these environmental things that basically the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and the rest of them are really kind of losing sleep over, and they want to kind of save and preserve the planet and blame every human being for it. We see that the forests, the magical forests all over the world are burning, in the United States, in California, with all the technical or digitalization and all the technical capabilities that a state has and can declare a state of emergency, or sequoia forestry is getting burned down. And we see, we know, for example, what used to be called a conspiracy theory about the weather changes and all that. We saw when the Australians started having their uprising. Then all of a sudden, in a place where there was no earthquake, they experienced a 6.0 earthquake, and they haven't had an earthquake for many, many, many years. So, I mean, and then we know, for example, every time Johns Hopkins has issued any type of programming or predictive programming or preparation or a drill, subsequent to that, we've had a catastrophic event in the United States. That includes 9/11, that includes the Katrina, and now with Event 201 includes the pandemic that we are experiencing. And a lot of brave, courageous doctors and pharmacies, small pharmacies, have come out. And we were expecting, for example, the United States president would be meeting with the small business component of this country, versus saying that I met, this is a quote, I met with these corporations, and he lists the largest corporations, largest multinational corporations that have nothing to do with promoting money and finance and employment in the United States, as a matter of fact. So it was quite disappointing, because small pharmacies are dispensing the necessary medicines. People are afraid to go to hospitals. There was this news about this freedom fighter lady who in Chicago, who was hospitalized and was texting her lawyer friends, and basically wanting to be discharged or refusing the medication that makes the kidneys fail. And she was given that against her will. She was intubated, and apparently any hospital that goes against, they have signed on with the CDC protocol. If they go off protocol, they lose their funding, and everything boils down to money, and the lady died. I mean, like anything, medicine is prevention, and then also early treatment. So we see that there's no science behind all of this that's happening, and there's only one doctor who comes on television and is cherished. Now they have documentaries about him, and the documentary is quite ridiculous, because it's just quite one-sided. There was a huge uprising in New York against Dr. Fauci, as a matter of fact, because they suspected the treatment was actually harming the people rather than the virus. And in Iran, for example, right now, we know a lot of people have tested HIV positive, and we don't know what the source of it is. And unless Iranians really gather up, like they have gathered up the past 43 years, and once and for all come to the streets and stay on the streets and make sure that they claim their country to restore the rule of law, which is the Constitution 1906, and the reforms of 1963. And then we have the free election that was established before Shah of Iran left. And as a matter of fact, now that we're talking about Shah of Iran, I want to remind everyone, when Iranians were quite disappointed that Mr. Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, met with Mujahideen, and in Iranians' opinion, it's a common belief that Mujahideen work very, very closely with Khomeini, and they really sabotaged the Iranians' freedom, and that was not a democratic overthrow or anything. It was a very it was a complete sabotage of a very well-run country that was that had a lot of savings, had a lot of investments, and everything boils down to money again. Otherwise, those people who were in prisons at Shah's time, they're all running the country, and you're all meeting with them, and those are the people who are breaking the human rights. And we don't hear anything about it. And the symbol of it, as a matter of fact, is we don't want to go too far to 40 years ago, or even this new supposedly person who was elected or selected by Khamenei and recently given a rope to have some sort of a degree from some country. That was like viral, that went viral. But as a matter of fact, if Shah of Iran, this clip of an Iranian person who is quite youthful and very knowledgeable said, look, Mr. Pompeo, if Shah of Iran were a dictator, he would not leave, and he would have killed these 200, 300 people, and you would not be dealing with these 200, 300 people who have killed millions at this point, who have terrorized the world. And you know better than that to meet these mujahideen, and we are quite disappointed to see that. And this is part of the system in the United States, that after the statesman, and which is supposed, I think this needs to be reformed. They basically have no political power, but then they are well known, they get invited, and they it doesn't mean that the policies of the United States is going to change. Not that the policies of the United States or the executive branch at this moment, and with several congressional members, are against the Americans. As a matter of fact, we have 3 women, supposedly Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and somebody who is famous for AOC, who has become a source of controversy, as a matter of fact, because she claims to be for freedom and all that. But then, we saw she went to the Met Gala and had her fancy multi-$1,000 designer dress, and she was not wearing a mask. Her husband was not wearing a mask. But, the little peasants who were lifting off her dress to help her move, and all the people around her were wearing a mask. And we see all these conflicting exhibition, which is telling of the future to come. And we saw that, for example, going back to the human rights, I don't want to forget mentioning that when President Biden virtually met with the Australian Prime Minister and also the British Prime Minister, and forgot actually the Australian's Prime Minister's name there, and said the man down under, Australia is violating their human rights. The United States should not be giving them nuclear submarines or whatever the dealings were doing out of nowhere to kind of create some sort of a disposition. I don't know what kind of a game is happening, because apparently now the French government has pulled out their French ambassador out of the United States, because there was a deal going on between France and Australia, and Australia canceled that deal or something. And it seems to be a 5-circus ring where these 3 people met out of nowhere. They assigned some nuclear submarine to Australia, who's violating in a most outrageous way one of the most democratic countries in the world. People have been locked down, they have been tortured, they have been shot at just for coming out and protesting, and the media has been really violating the truth. right out lying, for example, saying that these people who were wearing orange suits or orange vests, they were not construction workers, and they had, to kind of minimize the impact of what people can do, and what communities, when they come together, the impact we can all have against tyrannical situation. I mean, we see for example, even, I don't want to make it even about the masks, because it's about the money, but that mask over the child's face is absolute torture. Children need to communicate with their face, need to be heard, need to feel loved. Most of the time they're spending their time with their teacher, and they don't even get recognized, and they end up having impetigo or all kinds of skin issues where it was non-existent before. So the risk and benefit of this virus, for example, that is being claimed from people who have tape after tape, video after video, clip after clip about the population of this planet, because they're afraid that they're not going to have enough resources for themselves, and they are so wealthy. They have more money, for generational money, than anybody can even imagine. This greed and this whole fear campaign against the planet and the human beings, this hate against human beings, is just appalling, as a matter of fact, and goes against nature. And because it's unnatural and it's not, it has never worked in history, it will not work. And I wanted to also mention that despite all of this, we know Iranians have this localities and this friendship and this closeness, despite, we have many people from different backgrounds, they have different dialects, but they have intermarried, and somebody may be from the north, but they may be married to somebody from the south. So it's kind of an inseparable one country, and despite the fact that a lot of forces, international forces, they try to not mention name of Iran, and when they mention Iran, they always want to mention it in the bad way, like terrorists, as a matter of fact, which was created by the sabotage of these international oligarchs who were eyeing to destroy a well-established cradle of civilization, instead of embracing it, instead of appreciating it, to gather around and kind of start plotting against the people of a country who are one of the most hospitable, and you can see it, you can go in to any person's house, even when the Afghani people were running away from Taliban, Iranians were welcoming them to feed them. During the First World War, Iranians did the same. During the Nazis, Iranians supported the brothers and sisters from all over the world, Hungary, anybody who had Jewish papers that they didn't have papers that Hitler approved. They ended up in Iran, and we welcomed them. And to have it, to try to display or portray Iran in a negative way, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked for many, many years, thousands of years, and it's not going to work. And as a matter of fact, the Cyrus cylinder that is sitting in the that is sitting in the British Museum, and that is also the basis of the United Nations, and now has been derailed to really kind of has become a situation where now United Nations is demanding army, Macron is demanding EU to have an army, and to kind of if this program, this health security quote unquote program doesn't work, to kind of really push the nations into an unwanted war. And we see all these limitations with under the guise of protecting the environment, breaking the chain of production, in the name of limiting gases, for example, the carbon dioxide that's in scarcity right now in England is going to cause the poultry and soda at the minimum right now to kind of be scarce. And we are facing a catastrophic event. And that's why people from all over the world are uprising. The people from all over, Mr. Biden, people from all over the world are not uprising to support what you are stating. They're uprising to declare their humanity. And it was outrageous when you said the uprising is for what you are standing for. And what we've seen you stand for, you have not even, Ms. Misaki was not able to even say you've been to the south of the border to kind of see what's going on, despite all the issues that is happening. The open border, that means the open society that Mr. Soros and his evil friends have been supporting. And I say evil because it's evil. It's overstepping everybody's, people in the United States pay taxes. I mean, 6 months of the year, most of them work to pay, to work. They work for free to pay the taxes. And a country is established by their borders, by protection of their people. And people do have their own natural immunity to protect their human, to make decisions about their own body dignity, like everybody claims for example, right of abortion, my body, my choice, the bodily dignity of a human being, and not wanting to get that QR code to kind of get paid by the central banking and then get withdrawn taxes without their permission, or get fined without their permission, as a matter of fact, and get withdrawn automatically, digitally. That's what people are uprising about. That's what people are not approving. This whole movement from the United Nations is not an elective process, is not a democratic process, and there's been a lot of blood shed during the past few centuries for us to get to the freedom we have. And what we have is dear and is quite valuable, and people are sticking to the Constitution and the rule of law, and applaud all the congressional members who are standing with the American people, with the people of the world, from all over the world, all of the countries who are standing up for their human dignity, people who have received injection or did not receive injection. That's irrelevant. And to know that this fear campaign is going on and on and on to really make people frozen at some point. And I think it has started about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, people doing it with passive-aggressive techniques and methods. But it has started by the Swiss people actually going in front of the Rothschild castle, one of their castles, and getting water gunned. So this is extremely important and urgent for all of those oligarchs to really back off at this point, that the power of people, recognize the power of people, and whatever blueprint, whatever plan, whatever that is going on, to stop it and join the forces of humanity. You will not be remembered for the money you saved. You will be remembered for the humanity, like Martin Luther King, like Thomas Jefferson, like George Washington, like Reza Shah the Great, like Shahanshah Aryamer, who everybody skips over in the news to mention his name. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and he did so much for the peace in Middle East, and he kept, during the 37 years of his reign, he kept the most volatile region in the world in such peace that's incredible, including the peace that he helped in Africa. And his best friend, President Sadat, proved that if you are truthful, your name also will sound in truth and with love from all over the world, because you stand for truth. And that's the first lesson in diplomacy, not backstabbing each other. And we appreciate the Egyptians and the President Sadat for what they did for Iranians, and that will never be forgotten among nations. With that thought, I thank you again for being with me for this past hour, and I wish the best for humanity, peace, and moving in peace and gracefully accomplishing our law and order. We have our program tomorrow, September 24th at 12 noon, New York Standard Time. I again thank you again to the International Television Iran REA, Payande Iran. Thank you.